The Apartment, San Francisco, 1980s. She seemed like such a normal girl. I just moved to the city and soon discovered Hate Roommate Referral. They had whole notebooks of prospective roommates with self-ratings on cleanliness, noisiness, politics, religion, vegetarian, vegan, drug use, sexual orientation. I found a cool, high-ceiling, two-bedroom, top-floor flat just off the Panhandle. Valerie's roommate had just moved out with a boyfriend, and the notebook entry said she was open to a guy roommate. She was cute in an RDSF way, but not really my type, and I think she felt the same. She spent most nights at her boyfriend Scotty's place, so it actually worked out great. But then the landlord raised our rent by a lot. 2 days later, Valerie announced that she was moving in with Scotty. I just started a great new job, but I was still trying to save money. I loved the place, and she was almost the perfect roommate, quiet, not crazy, and rarely around. I dreaded having to find someone new and suggested that maybe I could pay 70% of the new rent and she could stay and pay just 30. She looked at me suspiciously. "Why would you want to do that?" she asked. I told her the truth, that it would still help me out rent-wise and I wouldn't have to find a new roommate. She didn't seem entirely convinced, but finally agreed. A few days later, she and Scotty dropped by to pick up her mail. The new rental arrangement soon came up. "That was really nice of you," he said, probing me with intense eyes. "I'm just glad it worked out," I said matter-of-factly, going through the countertop stack of mail, separating out Valerie's letters and mine. She'd told me earlier that Scotty was an aspiring film writer and was working on a new script idea. For his day job, he was a locksmith. She said that his story centered around a young lock expert who secretly broke into people's homes and then made very subtle changes around their houses. With each new intrusion, his character would up the ante, seeing how long it would take his victims to get the message, to recognize what was being done, and then to finally react. "That's the beauty of it," she'd explained. "It starts out with things that are so small and so subtle, a person might not even notice, or might think they were imagining things, or maybe even come to question their own sanity. The important part," she added, "is what that realization does to someone, how they react, and when they finally reach their breaking point." She seemed very into Scotty, so I agreed it was a good idea. "I guess write what you know," I said. The new rental dynamic worked out great, and I was still able to save a decent amount. But after a month or so, Valerie announced that she was moving out with Scotty after all. "I'm hardly ever here anyway," she explained. He came by that weekend to help. After many hours of hauling, they finally headed out with the last load of her stuff. Valerie handed me her key with what seemed like great ceremony. "Well, see you around," she smiled. About a week later, I was going through a stack of mail I'd let gather on the kitchen countertop, separating out bills, personal letters, throwaway ads. Near the bottom, between two junk mail flyers, I found a small scrap of torn paper with what looked like female handwriting on it. "Hi, Steve," it said. My mind raced, replaying how long it might have been there versus when Valerie had moved out. I couldn't say for sure, tossed out the note, and soon forgot all about it. Around that same time, I'd started dating a new girl in the neighborhood, and she eventually spent the night. Before we settled in, she got up to pee. Crawling back under the covers, she said, "I never figured you for the kind of guy that would put that blue chemical stuff in your toilet." I'm not," I said. She looked back at me. "Well, go look." Sure enough, the bowl water was a deep electric blue, and it hadn't been that morning. I pulled off the porcelain top. There was a tidy bowl device hanging inside. I got back into bed, saying I had no idea how it had gotten there. "Couldn't it be your landlord?" she asked. "He lives out of state," I said. "Well, maybe it was there all along," she suggested. "It ran low, and then the last bit dribbled out today." "The thing looks totally full," I reported. She looked back at me with worried eyes. A few days later, I was going through a new stack of mail on the countertop. I once again found a scrap of paper between some ads. It was even smaller than the first, with a single hand-drawn red heart on it. I looked to the front door and then checked the kitchen cabinet for Valerie's key. It was right where I'd stashed it. I came home from work several nights later. Closing the door, I suddenly realized that the whole apartment smelled like the noxious model airplane glue of my childhood. I went from room to room, trying to locate the source, but it seemed to be everywhere, and so powerful it burned my eyes. I opened all the windows and then went out to dinner. When I came back, things seemed better, so I shrugged it off, closed the windows, got into bed, and soon fell asleep. But in the middle of the night, I woke up and realized that the smell was back, and really bad. For the next several days, I kept all the windows open while I was at work, and then closed them when I got back home, seeing whether the smell ever dissipated. It didn't. I asked my neighbors on either side whether they'd noticed a chemical smell, or had perhaps been doing repair work. They hadn't, and looked at me strangely. My new girlfriend once again came to spend the night. At the door, I told her about the glue situation. She listened to my story with doubt and a bit of fear in her eyes. But once inside, she agreed that it was real and pretty bad. It was a cold and foggy night. I explained that we should probably keep the bedside window open in spite of the fog to dampen down the fumes. I got us an extra blanket from the hall closet. I hope those fumes don't damage my eggs, she half joked, trying to lighten the mood. She got up to pee in the middle of the night and then shook me awake. The toilet water was now green. In the morning, she seemed preoccupied, gave me a peck on the cheek, and then headed off to work. Later that day, she called me at my office. "Look, I really like you," she said, "but there are just too many weird things going on in your life that you should probably work on." Her voice trailed off. "So I guess I'll talk to you," she said finally, and then the line went dead. A week later, an underground transformer vault exploded outside my downtown office building, blanketing the area in a mist of electrical oil. The high-rise was soon evacuated by the fire department, and we were all sent home. On the dinner hour news that night, PG&E reassured the public that it was nothing to be concerned about and that they were investigating the cause of the explosion. The building remained closed for several days until they could decontaminate the area. A suspicious reporter had the oil residue tested at a lab and within hours determined that it contained high levels of PCBs. I watched a Klieg-lit scene outside my building with hazmat men in spacesuits steam cleaning the cordoned off area. The SF Public Health Director, lab report in hand, told an on-scene reporter that anyone who had been within the vicinity of the incident should bag up their clothing and surrender it to the city for testing and toxic disposal. That night, while taking off my socks, I discovered that a layer of skin on the soles of both feet was peeling off, like sheets of plastic. I wondered if it was the PCBs. Getting ready for bed, I opened all the windows to air out the glue fumes. On one window pane, there was a small rainbow-colored butterfly sticker. It hadn't been there before. Then I went to pee. The water was now purple. I turned on the radio, lay there staring at the ceiling. The station was playing Shock the Monkey. I wondered what else Scotty might have in store, how far it would all go, and when the movie would end.